The season that began in January, and now we're here. And so thank you to those of you who have been to each one. Each one has been so unique, so good, so worthwhile to be there for. So I'm trying to see if the previous one has some here, and so thankful for that. I don't want to take up any of Dr. and Gail's time because I want them to have all the time that they can have, and then at the end we'll have our birthday cake back there and celebrate a very special birthday. So I'm going to begin just with a word of prayer and then turn it over to you all. God, we give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for Doc and Gail, for who they are, for what they mean to each person that's here in this room, what they mean to our church and our community. We pray a special blessing upon Doc and his birthday today. We celebrate his life, celebrate the gift and blessing that he is to so many and to us in this room. We pray that you would help them as they share tonight to be able to sum up memories and special stories, to be able to know what to share with us. And we just thank you for the privilege of hearing from them tonight. In your name we pray. Amen.
Well, I'll just tell you all, I think this is the hardest thing I've ever done. um, I never learned to paraphrase. I always had to give every detail. And in fact, I could look at the people who didn't want me to speak, because they'd heard me speak before. And I've just written this and rewritten it, and I'll just leave out, if I think y'all are wiggling around or you think you look like you might leave, I'll just leave out something. But we start, I'm Gail, that's Doc, and it is Doc's birthday. And on your way home, you might drive by our house because there is a big birthday card all the way across the yard. And we really haven't even had time to look at it real good. But so far, he's had a good birthday. I told him that I'd just celebrate with him tomorrow if that was okay. Doc and I formally met in Midland in 1962. We went together 1 year, and then we married in the First Methodist Church. We were married by Dr. Timothy Guthrie on November the 27th, 1963, the day school was out for Thanksgiving, and 2 days before President Kennedy was assassinated on Texas soil. And believe me, that can be very detrimental to wedding. We were very sorry that happened. But we had to peel the wedding party off of the TV, to be in the wedding. But, and then Jamie was born 2 days before, so this has kind of gone with us throughout our life. And Doc's history, I'll just start out with him first. He's going to speak when spoken to. He said, well, I didn't write anything. I said, no, I wrote your part. I'll just call on you, Doc.
Nothing like being truthful, is there?
Doc's history is that today is his 82nd birthday, and someone asked him yesterday how old he was, and I thought he said 91, and I said, Doc, you're not 91. He said, I didn't say I was 91. I don't remember who that person was, but I hope I don't see him again. Doc was born in Fort Worth on April 22nd, 1936. He was one of 5 children. He was number 4. And the football coach, Coach Dan, was a very good friend of his at William James Junior High, and he offered him an athletic training job because, Doc, were you going out for football?
No, I was not 5 feet tall and weighed 96 pounds. You know how big the junior high kids are now. Well, they were every bit as big then, too.
Well, I guess Coach Dan really thought Doc wasn't going to make the team. So he asked him if he'd like to be a student trainer. And Doc knew what that was. And so he took the job in junior high, and then he went to Poly High School, and he was the trainer there, and on to TCU, and got a scholarship at TCU his third and fourth year. And at TCU, everybody knew Doc, who he was, and actually, this is probably somewhere else in my story, but the football team had just flown in from TCU. The TCU football team had just flown in from Wisconsin. They played Marquette University, and we were in the student center, and someone introduced the whole team and the trainers and all to a few of us, and Doc was one of them. And then later on in life, when I got to know him, I said, you know, I do know you. I've met you before. He said, I know that. I said, no, you don't. And he said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I can tell you where we were and everything. Well, he'd heard me say that many, many times, so he'd memorized it. But I'm telling you all, I'm sure he didn't know, or didn't remember. But everyone knew Doc, but they called him Hambone. And Doc will tell you why.
I was manager for the football team, and Coach Dan Campbell was the head coach, and he hollered at me, and when he did, well, I didn't pay any attention to him, and then my dad got involved, and he says, well, just call him Hambone. So that's how that name stuck. And I carried it with me through high school and through TCU and through the military down at Leesville, Louisiana. You talk about an armpit of the United States. There it is.
And Hambone followed him all the way to Midland, but when he got to Midland, they started calling him Doc. And they were just getting trainers. Well, that comes in a minute. They didn't have Lee yet, so they didn't have trainers, just had Doc. And after Doc graduated from TCU in 1958, he joined the Air Force National Guard because he didn't want to be drafted. So he went to basic training in San Antonio for 6 months.
Yes.
And at Lackland Air Force Base, and he just thought that, you know, he had the world by the tail since he'd done that, and that he had found out there was an armory out here, and he could go to meetings on weekends. No, he had already planned to go back to Fort Worth to go to meetings once a month. And he rode, after the football game, he would ride the train in from Midland at midnight and do his National Guard stuff all weekend, and then ride the train back and get back in time for school. But that got kind of old for a year. And so he had to transfer to the Army because they had the Army National Guard in Midland, but didn't have the Air Force. Well, as soon as he transferred, there was the Berlin crisis, and he was called to go. But he had to go to, that's what he's talking about, Leesville, Louisiana. And he had to go there for a year. And the powers that be in Midland, Texas did everything they could possibly do to get him out of that because school was starting and they needed him here, but it didn't work. Doc said, you know, you just can't tell the Army what to do. But they tried. So he was gone for a year, and that was the year that I came. So he wasn't here. But he needs to tell you about his birthday, and it's kind of ironic that today's his birthday. But when he signed up for the Air Force National Guard, Doc, tell him what happened when you put your birthday down.
Well, I wrote down April 18th, and this lady said, well, no, that's wrong. Said, it's not April 18th, it's April 22nd. And I said, well, now wait a minute, I think I'm smart enough to know when my own birthday is. And so I went home and asked Mom if she would dig out my birth certificate. And when she did, I have a sister, Margie, who taught out at Lee High School. She was the first cheerleader sponsor out at Lee High School. And
You asked her, and she said, well, he said, Margie, when's your birthday? And she said, April 22nd. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, it isn't. And she said, I beg your pardon. And so for how many years, 20 some odd years, his mother had switched their birthdays by mistake.
well, you know, when you, back then, and some of you can remember the days were pretty tight and pretty, there wasn't that much in computers or anything you just did everything by mouth. And, but she came out and was a cheerleader sponsor out at Lee for a couple of years. And then she decided she'd go to greener pastures and ended up in San Francisco, California. And it was something else.
Doc said it's pretty funny when you spend 20 some odd years, your birthday being one day, and you find out it isn't. But, okay, so Doc, after the way he got to Midland, after he signed up and got out of basic training from the Air Force, he did substituting and was just looking for a job. But he went to Austin to the Texas Relays, and he ran into Audrey Gill, whom a lot of you will know, the athletic director at Midland High. And
for the Midland Independent School District.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. All right, but he said we have two high schools. We have Midland High School in Carver, and why don't you just drive out to Midland and interview with us? So he did, and he took the job, and he said, I did not know one person, and that was a long drive then. But his new address was a garage apartment at 2305 West Story, or 6 garbage cans west of the press box at Memorial Stadium. And that's what Doc always gave. And I said, you don't write that down, do you? I mean, they're going to wonder who they hired. But anyway, Doc, I told you, Doc had to transfer into the Army, and sure enough, there he went. He went right off. So that kind of brings us up to when I arrived. I got here in 1961, a graduate of TCU. I was from West Texas. I waited 4 long years to come back. And someone said, Gail, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I said, I am going home. And I never intend to leave again. And so the first date I had with Doc, I told him that, just seeing how far I'd get. And I'm still here. But anyway, I graduated in 61, and I did know Doc's sister at TCU. She was between us, and he came out here, then she came out here, and then I came out here. And but she came to teach, and that's when Lee opened in 1961. And I'm sure a lot of you remember the biggest flood ever, the biggest rain. You really couldn't get there. It was just so flooded and muddy. But anyway, they had 2 high schools then, Robert E. Lee, and she was the cheerleading sponsor. And she actually was living with some girls from Big Lake, and that's where I'm from. And I was born in San Angelo, the closest hospital to Big Lake, but I grew up on a ranch 30 miles out of Big Lake and 70 miles from Midland. But we moved to Big Lake to go to school, and when my brother was 6, and then I was born on his 3rd birthday, August the 26th of 1939, and because my mother wanted us to be born on have the same birthday, and she took castor oil, and it worked. And I was born, but my brother got his picture on the front page of the San Angelo Standard Times. He got a new cowboy hat, a rope, a belt, and boots, and baby sister. And he told me, he said, anytime anybody asks me about that, I always put you at the end. I said, thank you. But we moved back to the ranch after I graduated from high school, and my mother, I told her that I wanted to go to Texas Tech, but she chose TCU, and she won. And she told me I could go to Texas Tech if I'd go to TCU 1 year and see if I liked it. She said, everybody doesn't live in the country, everyone doesn't live in West Texas, and everyone doesn't just like cowboys, and you need to find out what the other side of life is like. And I said, but I don't want to. I don't want to go there. But I did. I loved it and had a lot of fun, and I stayed all 4 years. But I had told my family in the 5th grade that I wanted to marry either a coach or a cowboy. And I wanted to teach school 2nd grade, and I wanted to live in Midland because my aunt lived here, and it was far enough from Big Lake. I had higher sights than Big Lake, but I didn't want to get too far away. And so I wanted to be just as close as I could possibly get. I did teach 2nd grade in Midland, 8 years at Burnett, and it's Burnett, darn it. It's not Burnett. You know, we went through that, and everybody called it Burnett. But we were allowed to say darn it if you were talking about Burnett. But Doc's sister, like I say, Doc wasn't here, and I'd really forgotten about Doc. I forgot that I met him. But anyway, his sister Margie was moving to California, as he said, and she was coming by here to tell everybody goodbye. And I was telling her that afternoon that she was leaving, I said, you know, I have been dating this guy that he was just so rude today. These 2 girls just moved in from Carlsbad, New Mexico. And I said, he and his friends were just gawking over them and just in front of all of us if they'd been dating, and it just made me so mad. She said, oh, don't worry about them. Just put them out of your mind. My brother is coming to town. He is coming back. He's been in the Army, and that's a long story, she said. But he's been in the Army, and he was here, and he had to leave, and he's coming back. And she said, just don't think about them anymore. Just let them have those other girls. Well, I just want to tell you that one of those girls was the one that Jim Henry married. But so those guys, thank goodness they didn't get those 2 girls. But Jim was our very good friend, and they dated for a year or 2. But anyway, he got one of them. But anyway, she said, I'm going to leave, but I'm going by. She called Doc Jim. His family called him Jim. And she said, I'm going to go by and put a note on his pillow. And I'm going to tell him to call you. And when he gets here. And she said, he's coming in just any time. Well, she did that. And, of course, I wish he had the note, but he doesn't. But anyway, he called me. And he said, well, we're going to Amarillo tomorrow night to play football, but let's go to the movie on Saturday. And I said, okay. Well, anyway, he calls and he says, I am in Amarillo. And he said, I have a football player really hurt badly, and I can't come home. Well, that was about the middle of August, and we had our first date September 19th. And she did tell me he was very, very busy. And I thought, boy, he really is. But anyway, we finally went to the movie, and the only thing in Midland that was showing and it was at the Yucca, was Vincent Price and the House of Wax. But that started our first date, and we went together for that year. But the night, this is just hard to believe. It's almost like we made it up, but we didn't. We pulled up to the stoplight by Walgreens and down Andrews Highway, there by the hospital and Walgreens, and this couple pulled up from TCU. And I knew they had married. They were Doc's age, and at TCU, they were Mr. and Miss TCU. And I said, Doc, I think that's Ronnie Coleman and Joan Leatherman. And he said, it is. He said, they live in Midland now. And I said, oh my goodness, they were Mr. and Miss TCU. And he said, yes. I said, oh, I voted for them. I said, I just thought they were the cutest couple. And he said, you did. Oh, that's great. He said, I'll show you my scrapbook sometime. I got beat for Mr. TCU by one vote. And I said, well, Doc, I met you one time too in the student center, and you don't remember, so we're even. He says that's true, and his mother said so, but I had my doubts, but anyway. And they didn't stay in Midland long. I'm glad we didn't run into him again, because he would have brought that up. But anyway, we decided that we would get married, and we couldn't find a time to. When you're going to marry somebody that has a 7-day-a-week job, it's kind of hard to work it in. But we did get married, as I told you, on the day school was out for Thanksgiving. And we moved from our apartment in 1968 to a house across the street from the Fergusons. You probably remember Don and Nell Ferguson, a lot of you will. And I'd always said, if that house ever goes up for sale, we want to buy it. Well, Doc called me at school, and he said, that house is up for sale. Nell called. And I said, oh, but I don't want to buy it. And he said, why? And I said, well, we got married in this apartment, and I just hate to leave it. He said, Gail, we're not going to live in that apartment for the rest of our life. It's one bedroom. I said, well, okay. He bought it without my consent. But we're still in it. We just celebrated 50 years in it last week. March 28th, we've been there. And like I say, I had taught school until Kelly was born, and she was born in 1969. And we have 2 girls, and Jamie was born in 1971, and she lives in Phoenix. And I think Kelly's here. Kelly, can you just raise your hand? Well, Kelly and Todd and Mills and Sam. One's missing, and that's Blair, the oldest one, who is about to graduate from TCU. And Jamie and her son, Jeffrey. Jeff can't come. They'll be here next weekend. But anyway, we have 2 Aggies, and they married Aggies. And but Mills is a Longhorn, and Sam is going to be a Longhorn. Sam, can you raise your hand? And Sam we just got through with guitar at Midland High, and Sam was the king, so his grandmother's quite proud of that. And but anyway, let's see where we are. So we've got Kelly and Todd and the kids in Midland, and that is wonderful. Doc was the athletic trainer at Midland High for 31 years, and he retired in 1990 when Jamie graduated, and went to work the next day for Dr. Don Floyd, and was director of rehabilitation for him for 20 plus years. He also traveled to all the little towns all around Midland and offered his services in Dr. Floyd's until the oil boom came. And Doc had been the only one for 20 years in all those cotton fields out here. And we decided that he just might run into one of those oil field trucks. So he, he gave that up, but he still goes to work every morning out to Dr. Floyd's just for public relations, and a lot of people come by and visit with him, and he goes from about 8 till 11:30 every day. So he's still carrying on his career. But Doc's claim to fame is that his number one goal in life was to go to the Olympics, and he was the first high school trainer to ever be invited to go, and he did go in 72, excuse me, and of course that was a year to remember, but he went and he had the kayakers, and I said, oh goodness, didn't you tell him what you wanted to do? And he said, no. And I said, well, you don't know anything about kayaking. He said, well, I don't want to go over there and be a trainer for something, baseball and all the things that I do. You know, I want to be something that I don't do. So he did go, and it was a wonderful. Doc, can you tell him something? What's your favorite thing about the Olympics?
Well, of course, march-in was very important, and I enjoyed that when we all lined up. And of course, the morning that we were to parade, the Arabs had sneaked into the village and had killed 6 of our athletes. And I didn't know anything had happened. And I went to breakfast that morning. The old boy waiting tables says, what are you doing out running around? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? I said, I wanted to eat breakfast, so I'm over here. And he said, well, have you heard that the Arabs sneaked in last night and killed some of our athletes? And we had given three of the kids that were killed, we had given them their physicals in Washington, D.C. before we shipped out. And so it was quite a loss. But it's amazing how quickly you can recover. And of course, everybody was afraid they were going to cancel the Olympics, but the powers that be got rid of the Arabs, and we had the opening day ceremony in September of 72. And it was quite a thrill to put that red, white, and blue on and march with our whole Olympic teams down the main drag in Leesville, Louisiana. But I have been very fortunate in having the opportunities that I have. When I came to Midland in '59, I promise you I did not know a soul. And I spent the night in my car, and then went for my interview, and Audrey Gill was the athletic director then. And Audrey said, are you aware of how much is involved? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, we're probably going to open up a new high school this next summer. And when they did, they said, which school do you want to go to? And I said, well, I'm acquainted with all the people at Midland High. I would prefer to stay there. And so he said, can you help us find a trainer? And I said, yes. There's a young man, Billy Wilson, from El Paso that's interested in the job. And he said, well, do you know anybody else that might be interested in working at Lee? And I said, yes, my little sister, Margie, became the first cheerleader sponsor at Lee High School. So we had a good time joining back and forth at each other.
And with Doc, you said, someone asked you, said, how do you feel about working on the best athletes in the world and then coming home to high school athletes? And what was your answer?
My answer was, I left behind the best athletes in the United States because there's nothing like working with the high school athlete. And of course, with one high school, it made all the difference in the world. Of course, when they built Lee, that split the community. And Garfield was the dividing line, if you can imagine, to where Lee is now. And they were finishing up building Lee High School when that happened. And so we hoorah'd each other, Margie and myself, about who was going to win. And of course, I told her, I said, be careful about what you say, because Midland High has got all those kids. They gave them a choice if they wanted to go to the new school or they could stay at Midland High if they were seniors. And with that exception, all of them chose to stay at Midland High. And we got beat that year in football by Permian 14-12. And
I have to butt in here. That was the worst fuss Doc and I had ever had the night that we played Lee, because he congratulated every Lee player, and Midland High had lost. He congratulated them, and I said, well, you just act like you don't even care if we lost. And he said, you know what? Those were my athletes that went to Lee. And he said, they played the game and they won. I said, oh, okay. And he said, I will congratulate them the next time they win. But I had a lot to learn being a trainer's wife. But Doc was fair to everybody, and he always, when Tommy Franks came here and spoke, he said, Doc, I begged you to do something about that and not send me over there. But Doc, I had to go. And he said, Tommy, I couldn't do anything. He said those kids cried, hollered, screamed, and yelled because they didn't want to go. They just didn't want to change schools. But anyway, that brings us, I do want to insert this. Doc was a Presbyterian when we married. He'd always been a Presbyterian. And I'd always been a Methodist. And my mother used to drop me off at the church early on Sunday to help the preacher light the fires and put out we had little stoves. And I put out all the hymn books. And I said, I just can't leave the Methodist church. And he said, well, we'll just visit. When we were going together, we visited. We'd go to the Presbyterian and the Methodist and back and forth. And I said, Doc, I think everyone is younger at the Methodist church. And of course, we were really young. I said, I just don't see that many young couples there. And he said, well, maybe not. And I said, no, I've already investigated it and observed it, and I just think that we'd better join the Methodist. But we did, and he's quite happy about that. But
we got married in the old church that was on the corner, and then we built new church, and they tore that old one down. And but it was such a historical thing. It really was.
And I really protested that too. I stood out on the corner. I didn't know what a protester was, but I did not want them to tear that down because we got married there. But anyway, we had so many newly married couples, and I think a lot of them are in this room right now that you got married around that time. And we came, the class we were in was the Cum Double, and they spelled it Kumdubl. Now, I don't know if that was correct or somebody just made that up. I thought it was kind of cute myself. But we were in the Cum Double. You couldn't have any children. And that's the class now that is the partners class. So they did progress. And Doc taught the 9th grade Sunday school class for 25 years. And one day he just said, I'm going to stop teaching Sunday school, and I'm going to be a greeter. Well, no one had asked him to be a greeter. I mean, he just made that up himself. And he always wore that red coat. And he said, and he stood right out here. That place is still here. A lot of places are gone, but that place is still there. And he said, I have more fun. I just greet everybody and tell them which way to go and everything. And he said, they think that I know what I'm doing because I wear this red coat. And I said, well, okay, but have you asked anybody in the church about that? He said, oh, no, they're real glad I'm doing it. And so somebody came to me one day and said, you know what, we're thinking about forming a group of greeters, and we're going to pattern it after Doc. And I said, you are? He said, yes, and we're going to wear red coats. I said, really? I said, well, Doc kind of took that upon his own to do that. But, and so finally, it took a year or two, but anyway, how many of you are the greeters and you wear red T-shirts? Yeah. Well, I just want you to know that Doc created it on his own. But I have taught Sunday school for 43 years in the same grade, 4-year-olds. And Nathan Pipkin was our education director, and Jamie was going to be in the 4-year-olds, and the teacher had been there forever. She came out of the McLaughlins. You know how wonderful they were. But she had to retire because she was ill. And I just went to him and said, I want you to get a very good teacher for Jamie. I want her to have a good Sunday school teacher. And he said, okay, I'll get to work on that. But he said, but would you want to take that just until I find someone? I said, well, yeah, I can do that. 43 years later, people, I am still there. And I have a feeling that he didn't ever think about asking someone else. But when I was in Big Lake in the Methodist Church, I don't know if the Dolans are here tonight. Are they? Jean Dolan's great-grandmother was my choir teacher. And we walked to her house after school, just a block or so, and she had a baby grand piano. And we just thought that was wonderful. Well, she just let us, we laid on it and we put our head on it and just fingerprints, all over it. But she taught us to sing, and it seems like we just sang on Easter. But then Jean's great aunt was my Sunday school teacher all my life. And his grandfather was in my class in school. So anyway, I told him all that, which he really didn't know, And he said, really? I know he wondered how I was still living. But I've taught 43 years, but Debbie Markley has been with me 20 years of that. So has shared it with me, and you know, I just thought I did perfectly fine by myself, but our church decided everybody needed a partner, and they had the right idea. I did. I didn't know I did, but I did. So it's been wonderful being with um, Debbie. And I'll tell you what, the thing that Doc and I had the most in common about, both of us, I said, "What's your favorite church song?" And he said, "What a friend we have in Jesus." I said, "But that's mine too." I couldn't believe it. And I said, "Well, why is it yours?" And he said, "Well, you know, I walked everywhere I went, and I had to walk home at night. And my mother told me to just walk right down the center of the street and whistle, 'What a friend we have in Jesus,' all the way home. And I would be, I'd kind of know what time he was coming, what time you're coming, and I'll stand out there and I will hear you whistling in that song, and I'll know that you're on your way." And so he did that forever. He said, "But what about you?" And I said, "Well, my grandfather, when they moved in from the ranch, he dressed every morning and sat on the side of his bed, and he drank coffee out of a saucer, and he rolled his cigarettes. What was it that you always carried in your pocket? The tobacco, Bull Durham." And I never saw him smoke it, but he would roll it and he'd go, he'd spit that tobacco out. And he's, "What a friend we have in Jesus." He sang between coffee, a slurp of coffee, and rolling a cigarette. And I sat on the rug down on the floor and listened until I learned every bit of what a friend we have in Jesus. So, anyway, Doc and I, that's just what we had in common. And Doc, tell them about your trip over to Northside on the bus and you getting all the autographs.
I was, I guess, in the 6th or 7th grade, and the bus, we traveled by buses in Fort Worth back then, and we couldn't afford a car, and the baseball team, the Fort Worth Cats, were out on North Main, and I would get on a bus and ride it, transfer 2 or 3 times, and get out to LaGrave Field and watch the game. And of course, I still have the little program with the signatures of the players on them, and Duke Snyder and Chris Van Kuyk and a bunch of Monty Bagwell. A lot of those guys were on that team, and it was a thrill to always go out and watch them play. And of course, they got to see enough of me that they kind of made me, took care of me and everything. And so it was wonderful.
And Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson was one of those. And Jackie was the guy that integrated the white baseball teams. And Jackie was there. The Cats played the old Brooklyn Dodgers. And it was a thrill always to go out and meet all those guys. And then I'd get back on the bus and transfer back, get back out into Forest Hill. And it was really neat. That's it.
Okay, Doc. And I also wanted to tell you all you know, it just seems like everything, when you stay around long enough, and we have in Midland, you, you get to where, oh, I don't know what it did. Somebody wants me to quit. I was gonna tell you all that, well, I guess I'll wait. Oh, we gotta do this again. I don't know what I did. You know, he doesn't know how lucky he is. He's getting to do it. Is that on? It's not on.
It's got turned on. And I gotta go back over here.
Okay. Well, you know, my brother always told me that all I had to do was yell out the back door, and I could announce anything I wanted to. But I do talk pretty loud, but You want, oh, okay. All right. I was going to tell you all, I have to tell you one more thing about Big Lake. Linda Johnson's mother lived on my street, and she was my babysitter when I had a babysitter. And what I was going to tell you, it's just fun. Uh, Anytime that I have to get volunteers and all, well, if I just start with the Methodist Church first. And I told Tim Walker one time, I said, you know, the Methodists have arrived. And he said, and what do you mean by that? And I said, well, everywhere I go, everyone's a Baptist. And I said, you know, I've just started asking all my Methodist friends to join me at the parade, the childhood home, the Bush Childhood Home, and everywhere. And now those are Methodist functions. He said, well, you've come a long way, haven't you? And I felt like I had. My mother moved from the ranch up here and lived out at Manor Park for 12 years. And Kelly and I were cleaning out her townhouse and in 98. And Kelly rattled a little box and she was going to throw it away. She said, oh, I just think that's old stationery or something. And I said, well, you'd better look in it. And my mother had written some memories of Gail because my brother had a full baby book, everything filled out and all, and my name was all that was in mine. And I'd been very disturbed about that always. And so Kelly opened the book, and here it was. It's not dated, but she had to have written this just maybe a year or two before she died, and just stuck it back in the box and forgot to tell me she did, but I'm going to read it. She said, some memories of Gail. Gail was born on her brother Leslie's birthday, 3 years later during the Depression, and we didn't take many pictures of her, but she has made up for the lack of pictures during the years. We moved to Big Lake in 1942, and Leslie could start to school and lived across the street from the school. Gail was ready to go to school then, but was only 3, so had to wait. She would sit out on the curb with her security blanket and doll and suck her thumb, weather permitting, as long as she could, then come in the house and crawl up in her kitty cup and take a nap. She sucked her thumb until she was 12 years old, and we cut her pigtails off. Gail caught ringworm from a human, doctor said, about the size of $50, and I took her to Dallas for treatment and they clipped her hair off all over her head. So I dressed her in overalls and tams to match. And when we would go to a place to eat, she didn't want to go in because the waitress would ask, "What does the little boy want to eat?" And she would cry. The doctor said she would turn gray at an early age, and it would start from the spot where she had the ringworm. And he was right, because her hair did start about the time he said it would. I kept the medicine for a long time, and she still has the prescription that was put on the first bottle. And I have it here in a shadow box if y'all want to see it. Leslie taught Gail to be scared of the dark. And she is still scared of her shadow. And surely she wrote this a long time ago. And will not stay alone, even with her kids during the night. When Gail went off to college, we wrote to each other every day for 4 years. She kept all the letters and plans to write a book when she retires from her many hobbies and etc. Well, I never have gotten there yet. We had in PTA in Midland, we had a patriotic storytelling troupe, and there were about 5 of us, and we went to every school and put on this program. It was sensational. And Mark Edgar's mother was the head of it. She was Uncle Sam. She was the brains of it. She organized it. And they had an old English car that, you drive on the wrong side. We drove all over Midland in that, and we were all in costume. And we performed for Barbara Bush. She was here visiting, and we performed for her, and she said that it was the most magnificent thing she'd ever seen, and she just wanted us to bottle it up and take it across America. And I decided that I would do just that. Well, I've saved every red, white, and blue thing I have, all the clothes, and I thought my grandchildren might go with me. They haven't gone yet. We have not, and Betty retired. Well, Betty was our brains. So when she retired, and someone said, "Well, can't you get her script?" And I said, we probably couldn't read it. It was so good. But I don't know if anybody in here, did you ever see us perform that? Well, it was wonderful. And I told Doc, I said, I'm a collector of everything. I'm really a doll collector, but I'm a collector of the red, white, and blue. And now I'm just a collector of Doc. If you think someone doesn't have a lot of memories and collections, so we do have everything on the walls, the floors, the tables, just about the front porch, the back porch, the garage, just wherever. But Doc has, I told him, I said, you can't retire and move out of any other place because we cannot take the stuff home. And he still has his office at Dr. Floyd's, and it still has wonderful memorabilia there. And our church, our church has really been our haven. Like Doc, tell him about the carpet you had here that you had made for your Sunday school class. Was it red or purple?
Red.
Red, and you had a big cross cut out and put in it. And do you know what happened to it? Well, I don't either. That's the one thing we don't have. I think we left it. You left it in that room, and probably. But that 9th grade, when they were so excited about going to 9th grade because they get to have that carpet. But and in my Sunday school class, we had many things. I just made some notes that one 4-year-old his family told me that he was being questioned about what we did in Sunday school, and what did he learn that day. And he said, why don't you just ask Mrs. Dodson? She did the lesson, and she knows everything about God. I mean, she just knows everything, and she could answer better than I. So he got off with that, and then we had two that you'll know who they were, and they wanted to make announcements, and I said, okay. Jenna Bush got up, and she said, we are moving to Washington, D.C. We are going up there to help our grandfather run for the United States. You could hear her all the way down the street. The United States of America. And, we didn't really know he was going, and he did go pretty quick after that. And Barbara got up and said, that is not true. And I thought, oh. She said, we are going to Washington, D.C. But we are only going up there to write our grandfather, who is running for the President of the United States. We're only going up there to write his speech. And she sat down. But, and there we go again. I'll just yell away. And all right. And can you hear? Is it on? Okay, and we'll just wrap this up, and I just need to put a plug in for my claim to fame, and that's the July 4th parade, and will have done it 44 years this year. Longevity is the name of the game. And really, and you like the theme, it's because you're so good that I tell you what, it could be if it can't find anybody else. I tell you what, no one wants, everyone says you had to take it for that long. But I was Cabot Elder president, my sorority for 40 plus years, and Doc never dreamed that he would have probably been the trainer or the rehabilitation person for 50 years. He never dreamed that he wouldn't walk, jump, and run as he had done for 31 years. And just all of a sudden, he couldn't do that anymore. But he still, God's given him the gift of visiting with people and and he still can tell you how to get well. And I've heard so many people say, Doc, you're just wicked. I mean, you really are. But I did walk again, and thank you for doing it. But anyway, we had a wonderful life, and it's been fun, and the First Methodist Church is a big part of it, and our loving God is always with us, and I think He directed Doc to the Methodists, and I'm so glad. Thank you, Doc. So, I'm just going to leave you with one quick story. The night after the Permian game, Kelly and Doc and I were still standing out in by the training room. It was getting darker and darker. Todd went to get the car. The buses were leaving, and Doc said, what are we waiting on? And I said, well, Kelly and I want to see Blake. Blake Felton is the Permian coach. And he said, oh, I'm sure he's already gone. I said, well, there's one or two buses more, but I'm sure, I said, we better just go, Kelly, they're turning out all the lights. And, as we saw this one bus coming with headlights, and so, we stood there for a minute, and we thought, well, we'll just walk on, because that's probably not them. And all of a sudden, we heard this scream, stop, 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 stop. It was Lakeville. He was telling the bus driver to stop. He said, that's my high school trainer. He's sitting right there in that wheelchair. Stop, I have to see. And he ran across the parking lot, and he knelt down, and he said, oh, Doc, I'm so glad to see you. Just he hugged him and hugged him and hugged him. And that's the wonderful life that Doc has lived, and the memories, and they never forget. It doesn't matter who they're coaching. But it was wonderful. And so we thank Kelly for standing around and being determined that we get to see blood. But anyway, there are a lot of things to go with it. And I'm sure we'll never be asked to do this again because we're over time. But anyway, I've got some things up here if you want to look at. They kind of pertain to the things that we talked about. And when I read my notes, I'll see all those things I left out, but aren't you glad? We'll be here all night. Thank you.
I don't think I've ever known two people who are more active and faithful, and we are certainly blessed in our congregation and benefit from that. I do encourage you to come by the table and look at the things, some of the things that are out there of happiness is not a destination, it's a way of life. It's something else that says it's a wonderful life. Obviously represents both of you so well, and your collection of things in your home and part of your story. Doc and Gail will be here, and you can visit with them. Boyce, did you have a question real quick?
Oh, yes, I did. And I also rode in a motorcade from outside Midland into the Bush home, not knowing where I was going. But they just told me to get in, and I wouldn't do that. If they were total strangers, but I felt like they were good total strangers. And I knew that motorcade was going somewhere that was important. And that's when George got to see the home for the first time. He had told us he couldn't, and and I looked for that Secret Service man on TV yesterday at Robert's funeral. His name was Mo. He just said, "Do you think that you can step up high enough to get into that motorcade?" And I said, "Yes, I do." No, I couldn't. I don't know how I got up there. God just gave me a push because I thought, well, I'm going. He said, well, just get in there. Then, first of all, we had to walk over all these wires and everything. And he just said, just hold on to me. And I did. But I jumped in there. But yes, I did. I went to 2 inaugurations. And the Bush home I'm there. I just happened to go by and ask them when they were going to open. And I've been there. I was there about a year, almost a year before everybody else was. You can always say the wrong thing. And we have a lot of volunteers in here. If you've been a volunteer at the Bush home, raise your hand. And they're wonderful ones too. And Bob Booth told me, Gail, I just don't think I can do that. The next time I saw him, he said, what time do you want me to come? I'll quit.
I'm going to ask Pastor Steve if he'll come and close us off, and also you would lead us in singing happy birthday to Doc. And then I'd like to, I know you're all anxious to visit with them, but I'd like to get them over by the cake so we can get a picture of Doc and Gail with the cake, and then we'll cut it up and continue the visit.
So a couple of things. One of the things that makes a pastor smile just about more than anything is to see the members of his church making an impact and a difference in our community. Doc, my youngest, fourth child, Joey, he plays baseball on the field that bears your name. And every time I look up to check the score, I'm reminded of all the people that you have touched and blessed in our community.
It's been my pleasure.
Amen, brother. And Gail, how many pastors have led prayer at the 4th of July parade that you have been so faithful to help all the Methodists, you say, get involved?
Well, I told Tim, I said, this will always be a Methodist parade, I'm sorry, as long as I'm in charge. And he said, well, you were coming, and I saw you at a football game, didn't I?
Did.
And he said, he'll be glad to do it. Okay, and I went down and asked him, and he said, I certainly will, and I thought he has no idea. He's in for life.
Well, I'll take it because, see, both of you have inspired so many people to be active in our community, and y'all have been a means of grace in many people's lives. And for that, we give thanks, and we are appreciative of you very, very much. Amen? Amen. So, man, we sang happy birthday so many times, right? And so I think instead of singing happy birthday, Doc, let's sing y'all's favorite song.
What a friend we have.
Yeah. So let's do it, y'all. So what a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God. So, Lord, we are truly grateful for your faithful witnesses, Doc and Gail Dotson. I pray that you will continue to fill them with a deep, deep sense of your love, that you will give them strength in their inner being, and that they will continue to be able, with all of their heart, to be able to proclaim the height and the depth and the width of your love for them and for others. We are grateful for them. We give you thanks. In Jesus' name. And everyone said, Amen. So we're going to gather around over there and have birthday cake.